Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today I review the Warhammer 40k novel Paragon of Faith and Other Stories. As always with my reviews, I will discuss themes and narratives of the stories, but without any major story spoilers. And usually we'd begin now by checking out the synopsis off the back of the book, but this one's a little bit different in that it's a collection of shorter stories. So instead, we'll just jump straight in, and I'll go through them in order. Now, the first story is Paragon of Faith by Amanda Bridgman, and this one is more a novella in length than a short story, as it's quite a longer read. It follows the events of a Sister Aenor of the Valorous Heart, and her squad of mighty Paragon warsuit-equipped sisters. And it's kind of interesting here as this take or aspect of the story gave it a bit of a unique feel to your more usual Sororitas read. Seeing the sisters' prowess, but also more importantly her relationship with the suits. Feeling almost like a bit of a lesser kind of version to what we see with the Imperial Knights and their pilots. How it is more than just a simple weapon or tool to them. That genuine connection that is fostered between them. Again, it's a lot more dialed down than that, but there's definitely vibes of that kind of feeling here. And it gives it a definitely interesting aspect in this way. However, I would say that a different take is contrasted by the plot and setting, which feels very much like your generic Genestealer cult uprising. I don't know if it's because I read so many stories or I just have a knack of being able to tell, but I just immediately knew where the big surprise was going to come from as soon as that character entered the story. And unfortunately, I was right. And so it just felt a little predictable for me on where it was going to go. However, that said, this story does give a really great bit of insight and explanation into how these kind of uprisings can occur. How and why the corrupted spawn of the cult are able to exist amongst the people. Really highlighting how grim the ordinary existence for the citizens of the Imperium must be. Definitely something I plan to discuss at a later date. So all in all, it's a bit of your standard sisters battling against the odds to save a world, combined with a bit of a fresher take with the Paragon warsuit equipped sisters. I'd say it was an enjoyable read, but nothing that really wowed me here. I think had it been fleshed out into a fuller story with the uprising being given more time to build, to be teased before actually erupting, I may well have enjoyed it more. But if you enjoy the more straightforward Sororitas action prosecuting the enemy, then you're going to enjoy this. Now the next story, Saint's Judgment by Ness Brown, is another pretty long story, and this one was absolutely fantastic. Here you follow a sister Dosia, a Hospitaller of the Order of Our Martyred Lady, and it's completely different to any sister's story I've ever come across. As the Sisters of the Order are dispatched to repel a traitor uprising within a hive city, Dosia and her team are allocated to a hospital near the front line to support, and more importantly, to attempt to deal with a plague sweeping through the citizenry and loyal defenders. And so it's brilliant. It's really brilliant, seeing how Dosia and her team take over the hospital and authority in place, get it back to working order, and how they begin to tackle this malady of a pox, all the while having to deal with being in a war zone. It is unlike any Sororitas story I've ever read, or at least that I can remember. And it is filled with really interesting little touches. The effect these sisters have on the patients they're in. Their singing of hymns while working. Dosia's logic and reasoning in combating the plague. the typical grimdark aspects included, and perhaps most intriguingly how her logic as a hospitaller contrasts against the more frontline sisters, and how that can lead to conflict of its own. I was absolutely hooked on this one from beginning to end. There's a lot less action than your more standard 40k read, but it absolutely works and stands apart on its own because of it. It is simply a fantastic read. Okay, now these two were really the feature longer length stories included here, and the rest are far more your prototypical short stories. Next up, the story Infernal Motives by Jude Reed is one that sees the return of the Demon Breaker, Aveline of the Order of the Sacred Rose. I won't beat around the bush here. If you enjoyed the earlier novel with the Demon Breaker, you will enjoy this one. It's a short, straight up piece of action within a forge world, with Aveline going up against traitor Mechanicus forces, supported by local Skitari. The problem I had with this is the problem I had when I read the novel, in that I just find the character of the Demon Breaker particularly unlikable. She just always comes across as bitter and rude to me, when there's no need to be. Now it does seemingly try to remedy that a little bit here at the end of this story, but it's too brief to have any kind of real impact. And so I would say that this one was my least favourite story of the collection. However, I did quite enjoy the premise of working with the Skitari and the accompanying Mufita, their leader. It's a particularly short read, and again, I really think it's just going to boil down to whether you enjoyed the Demon Breaker novel and character previously or not. Next up was Our Lady of the Voyage by Kate Flack. This one follows a sister Wolfrith of the Ebon Chalice upon the world of Cyphus 11. Here, the Order is part of an Imperial force laying siege to a rebel citadel. However, Wolfrith receives a rather unique solo mission in having to track down a missing priest who has disappeared with a skull of a saint, last seen heading up a nearby mountain. And so, given a guide in a local sergeant trooper named Grivath, off the two of them go on their mysterious quest to find the priest and the skull. And I've got to say, I really enjoyed this one. I don't know why, but it just kind of felt a little old school 40k to me. Like a story I could expect to see Uriel Ventris undertaking in one of his earlier novels, or a short story that you would have seen in an older codex. Just really different to the usual battlefields or torn apart hives that we see. Here we've got a guardsman and a sister hiking up a mountain, and it was great, it was absolutely great. It is short, so you don't get a lot of time with them, but even then it still managed to foster the growing connection between the two of them. The initial hostility to grudging respect. The sister's view of the guardsman without her unbreakable faith. There's not much I can say about this one without completely ruining the story, but it was just really enjoyable, and I think it was because that so different situation it took place in, almost feeling like a fantasy adventure in a way, rather than just your straightforward 40k one. A nice blend of the two. I can easily say one of my favourites here alongside Saint's Judgment. Probably my two standout stories. However, next was Joy of the Martyr, again by Ness Brown. This is another story with a great setting, however this one every inch one that fits 40k. This is straight up Sisters of Battle action, as Sister Vereen and her squad go classic Arnie 80s Predator action as they head through a jungle to reach an abandoned shrine. That really is the best way to describe this one. And I don't think there's anything else to say other than it's a fun read. Pretty short and sweet, so you don't really feel like you get to know the characters that well, but it's great for what it is. A Sisters of Battle short story. Honestly, you can't ask for more with this one. Anytime we get to see the sisters outside of putting down an uprising within a city or hive, I think it immediately gets a few extra points. And next, Redemption Through Blood by John Solito. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. This one is a short story that follows a sister, Marcella, who is having to contend with her anger in the battles against the forces of the Blood God. It was an okay read, highlighting the balance between righteous fury and true emotional fury, but I think it was a bit too short for me to get enough time with the characters to really begin to get attached to them. Again, another pretty straightforward action one here. However, lastly, we have The Fires of Our Faith by Nicholas Werner. This one follows a Canoness Florelia as she leads her forces beneath the gaze of an Inquisitor. I was a little doubtful on this one at first, however there's a great twist or revelation that makes it all make sense by the end. So it went from being one that I wasn't particularly sure on to being one that I thoroughly enjoyed. Another particularly unique setting here, as we don't often see the sisters accompanied by Inquisitors. And this one is a particularly extreme one. And so while this one is very brief, the premise and presence of the Inquisitor makes this one of the better stories included for me. And so that's the lot. That is all the stories included within Paragon of Faith. So, as you can see, there's a nice blend of your standard straightforward action Sisters of Battle tales here, combined with some more really unique and intriguing premises. However, that does make it pretty hard for me to score, as there's some in here like Saint's Judgment that I'd give an easy 4 out of 5, even tempting into a 5 out of 5 Blessed by the Emperor, just for how truly different that story was, showing us that unique Hospitaller perspective. And then the Mountain Quest of Our Lady of the Voyage, one I just absolutely loved as well, an easy 4 out of 5. However, the rest of them probably land closer to a 3, all good enjoyable reads, but not quite the great ones that reach a 4. So it's tricky. I'd say either a 3 out of 5 or 4 out of 5 depending on your personal preference. If you want straight up action, you'll probably land an easy 4, whereas I just love those more unique stories more, and I would have loved to have seen more of them. But I'll give it a 4 out of 5 great read and highly recommended overall, because I really did enjoy it. And I think the stories Saint's Judgment and Our Lady of the Voyage really did deserve to get that 4 rating at least. But as always everyone, what do you think? A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too? But with that said, I am off. And I'll see you all again real soon.